Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the panel. We're all here to discuss ESG policies and asking ourselves the question, how effective have they been at winning over our critics in the mining industry? Where have we succeeded and where have we fallen short? My name is Derek Riehm. I'm with SLR Consulting in Toronto, and I'll be serving as your moderator today. I wanted to introduce the other panelists. We have today with us Froydis Cameron-Johansson with Anglo American, Group Head of International and Government Relations. Sharon Flynn with OceanaGold, Executive VP of External Affairs and Social Performance. Hermien Uys with Vedanta Zinc International, General Counsel and ExCo. Hello, good morning. Val Madsen with St. Barbara, Executive General Manager of People. And Dr. Nicky Black with ICMM, Director of Social and Economic Development. And Richard Elmer, Regional Manager with Knight Piésold UK. Did I miss anyone? Got you all. Thank you. Well, I thought I would start off this morning talking about an issue which has certainly been an ESG challenge in our industry for the last 5 years. Our critics would perhaps call it an outright failure, and that is tailings. Richard Elmer, excuse me. What's your view on how the industry is responding today to the failures of the last 5 years, and are we changing any minds out there among our critics?
Certainly, I think there's been a significant change, particularly over the last couple of years. I would say as well that change was happening before the highest of profile incidents, such as Brumadinho. The industry was already moving before then. Probably in the wake of other high-profile incidents such as Mount Polley and Samarco, there was already an appreciation that something had to be done in the industry. So I think it's not just a reaction to the awful events at Brumadinho, but there has been a general improvement in understanding of tailings-related issues over the past few years. We're particularly seeing a much greater demand for assessing individual tailings facilities that the companies are responsible for. So undertaking audits and reviews of facilities across the world. And it's not just the majors as well. We're seeing that juniors and mid-tiers as well are understanding that they have a significant potential liability with their facilities, and that has led to a lot of work being undertaken in characterizing those facilities, particularly older facilities. So what we're really seeing now is a lot more investigation being carried out on those old tailings storage facilities. So doing a lot more investigation work, geotechnical investigation work. So undertaking cone penetration tests, geotechnical drilling, high-level sophisticated laboratory testing, so that we can look at the potential for things like liquefaction to occur and failures to occur. So I think there's a much greater acceptance of those more detailed, higher-end technical investigations to prove the stability of the facilities, and then obviously go on to look at remediation options, support options that can then be developed from there. So yes, we're definitely seeing a much greater demand, and it's driven not just by targets, but it's genuinely driven by a desire to do the right thing with people that we're working with.
Thank you. Well, that's progress. Froydis, Anglo operates some pretty high-profile tailings facilities, for instance, in Chile. How have you been strengthening your governance on tailings management in the last 5 years or so?
Thanks, Derek. I think from the tailings side, I think this is a really good sort of case study on the ESG engagement from a sort of multi-stakeholder perspective. So if you'd asked me, or probably anybody in the mining sector at the end of 2018 or the start of 2019, that by the middle of that year, 2019, the majority of the mining companies in ICMM, or all ICMM companies, will have disclosed warts and all about their tailings facilities, I don't think anybody would have believed you. And then we had the tragedy in Brazil, and then there was a real kind of coalescence around, wow, how did that happen again? And there was a sort of question mark about, well, how was this able to happen again? And so I think for us, we were in the process, and we had been on a, everybody's on a journey, but we were very much on the journey about how we are rolling out our global waste management and tailings standard. And we were very much of the thinking, a bit like with safety, this isn't something that's competitive. So we actually felt we had some quite robust governance processes, and our standards had been rolled out, and we felt that they were really providing those kind of additional layers of assurance, of inspection, of auditing. So we actually made our standards available for people. We put it out into the public domain because we felt this is something that we wanted to share with the industry, because as we all saw, one incident such as the tailings disaster doesn't just impact a company and a community, it impacts the entire industry. And it was through the relationships that we had across different stakeholder groups, both with the sort of investor community, the ethical investor community, with a lot of our faith engagement work that we've done, that we were actually able to have some both difficult and constructive conversations about how we were going to improve as a sector, increase our disclosure, and actually start to help sort of educate people about our operations and what does responsible mining really look like. And I think for me, the big point there was that lots of different stakeholder groups came together to ask questions and to really understand each other's perspective. So I remember a conversation that I had very early on with this, which was one of our investors was basically asking for like 100 pieces of information on this questionnaire, and actually to give that amount of information would be very confusing. So we actually had a proper conversation about, well, what is it you think your constituents need to make more informed decision? And because it was an engagement process, I think we actually, when we all came to the end and landed on the questionnaire that led to the tailings disclosure, I think everybody really benefited from that. It educated the industry about what stakeholders care about and what they really want to see. It educated our stakeholders through our conversations about our governance processes, how we're looking at technological solutions to actually take out tailings from operations. And I think it was an informative process all round. And ultimately what it's led to is the global tailings standard that Nicky is by far the best person to talk about here. But it's also led to what I think has been a big push in the ESG policy space, which is around transparency and disclosure. And I think that is something that is going to keep pushing forward, and rightly so. And I think for us, it's about looking at how are we actually providing that information in as real time as we possibly can to keep our stakeholders informed about how we are performing and what our operations, what's happening at our operations. So for me, I think that the tailings, having lived it, breathed it for about 2 years, I'm very grateful for the process, because again, I think it really helped people understand that the mining industry is important. There are legacy issues that we need to manage, but also there are people that are actually trying to really improve and do the right thing, and actually from a technological perspective, trying to rethink and reimagine what mining could look like as we go into the future. So for me, that's a huge success of sort of multi-stakeholder ESG policy advocacy that's led to a much better outcome for everybody involved.
Thank you. Thank you. And speaking of shared destiny, Nicky, ICM recently released the global standard, I guess it's about 3 months ago now, with UNEP and PRI on tailings management. Can you give us some short summary of its development and how the reception's been among our stakeholders and critics?
Certainly, Derek, and thank you. And thank you to Froydis really for just unpacking the power of a multi-stakeholder approach and the power of bringing stakeholders together around a table to address a shared challenge. And we really saw that in action through the development of the global industry standard for tailings management. So in the wake of the tragedy of Brumadinho, questions were rightly asked about the mining industry's ability to manage tailings facilities safely and transparently. And really, in the first of its kind, a response was convened by ICMM, as you've said, the Principles for Responsible Investment and the United Nations Environment Programme to launch the Global Tailings Review. And it was a carefully planned, independently executed process to establish the international standard for the safer management of tailings facilities. And whilst that process wasn't always straightforward, we believe that it's made the final product far more impactful. And what we're seeing, certainly through UN Environment Programme and the Principle for Responsible Investment's involvement and support, is that we are seeing and fully expect a much faster take-up of the standard beyond ICMM's members. It has become a membership requirement. Members have committed to implementing it. But certainly what we saw at the point of launch was a huge amount of interest. We had over 1,500 participants dialed into the virtual launch. There were over 300 press articles that covered the standard. The vast majority were broadly favourable towards it. And what we're seeing now is that the PRI and coalition of investors under both the Church of England and the Swedish Pension Fund have signalled their intention to advocate for the uptake of the standard as a condition of investment. And they have a broader agenda, as we know, beyond the standard in relation to tailings storage facility management. So we don't expect to see their attention waning or diminishing anytime soon. But certainly UN Environment has also committed to advocating for the uptake and implementation of the standard with that critical partner, their government, so their constituent government. So what we would, the headline is it's been well received. We do expect it to be driven forward by the three co-convening partners and to be uptaken broadly. In terms of ICMM's focus now and the focus of our members, we're developing a good practice guide to support implementation of good governance and engineering practices for tailings management across the mining life cycle. And we're also developing a conformance protocol, which will support companies and external providers who are doing self-assessments of implementation progress and conformance. So the logic behind ICMM doing this is very much that our members have made some hard-edged and time-bound commitments around implementation. So the commitment from 3 years from the date of launch to have implemented the standard for extreme or very high consequence facilities, and for all other facilities within an additional 2 years. So we're looking to move quickly to support them with the guidance that will help our members, the broader industry, and service providers in helping support implementation.
Well done, thank you. Before I move off tailings, one more question, and it goes back to Richard. As a practitioner on the technical side of the business, can you share your opinion on the global industry standard?
So I guess the thing that's come out of today is that I really support the introduction of engineering practices. At the moment, that isn't part of or it's not. It's a very light touch on the engineering, and I think that had been my concern about the new tailings standard. That what it really needed was input from the people that are designing these facilities. So people like ourselves and other specialist consultants that are designing the facilities, we felt a little bit left out of the process. And I'm really hopeful, Nicky, that you'll fully engage there's a list of about, I don't know, 6 or 7 consultants that are well recognized for undertaking tailings design. We're the ones that are designing these facilities, so we should be fully engaged in the process of setting the standards. I know that there has been engagement through the process, but I just feel that the engineering side has had less prominence. It's really important to get the governments right, don't get me wrong, but I just feel that there should be a greater emphasis on engineering. I really look forward to hopefully being part of contributing towards that and having a good engineering practice document guide. Then that would be a big step forward in the whole process, and I think that will bring on all the tailings design, the engineering design, raising the bar for engineering design. I think is critical to the success of the guidelines.
Thanks, Richard. All right, I'll shift off tailings. I wanted to move on to an issue that we've been discussing internally at SLR recently, which is we prepared a spreadsheet with a list of the ESG benchmarks out there, and I think we ended up at 22, and we were still adding them up. And what my own experience is working with smaller and mid-tier companies is that it's getting to be a pretty daunting list of benchmarks out there, that larger companies have a lot of resources to work toward all of them if they want, but the smaller companies often don't. And so I wanted to direct my next question to Hermien Uys. With all these benchmarks out there, how does Vedanta prioritize your ESG efforts? And what do you see ESG evolving at Vedanta in the next 5 years?
Thanks, Derek. So at a global level, the Vedanta Group measures its sort of ESG progress against the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So there's actually quite a good interactive section on the Vedanta Group's website, which shows progress made against the 17, I believe, Sustainable Development Goals that United Nations member states agreed to, I think it was in September 2015, to eradicate poverty, inequality, and to address climate change by 2030. So some of these principles include good health and well-being, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, clean energy, responsible consumption and production. So it's a very wide scope to comply with, and we've definitely not hit the green mark on all of these metrics. But it is a process that the group is committed to, and committed to such an extent, as I say, that it is visible on the group's website for everybody to track the journey with us. You mentioned at the beginning that I'm involved with the South African operations of Vedanta. It is held under an umbrella called Vedanta Zinc International. So we've got a suite of zinc mines in the Northern Cape in South Africa. And closer to home, as I am also legal counsel, our compliance is definitely measured against the mining charter, which is the hallmark in South Africa for mining companies' compliance with, I would say specifically the S element in ESG. Black Mountain Mining, the company that holds the mining licenses for our Deep Swartberg and Gamsberg mines in the Northern Cape, is doing fairly well with regards to the ring-fenced elements. There are 3 of them: black economic ownership, housing and living conditions, as well as mine community development. Those elements that are scored, we are also tracking well on, making good progress at a sort of a level 2-3 compliance on a scale of 1 to 8, which is not bad for a mid-tier. And those elements include employment equity, procurement, supplier enterprise development, as well as human resource development. You've asked, how do I see ESG evolving over the next couple of years? We've touched on that to a certain extent. mining companies definitely are and have been at the forefront of pushing, the ESG agenda. But if you look at what is currently going on in the sort of ESG debate, it's definitely around measurement and tracking. So S&P Global, I think at the beginning of the year, March, they published a report to show that more or less 11 of the top 40 mining companies in the world are actually, measuring themselves against ESG standards, reporting sort of on a publicly visible basis their progress made, and also tracking management and executive performance against those standards. So I think we have a long way to go in publicizing what targets we've set for ourselves and also how we measure ourselves against those targets. We've spoken about all of the standards. I know that there's debate about the ICMM's mining principles perhaps being used as a departure point for measurement. It's also interesting to see that many of the global stock exchanges in the world are now giving guidance to investors on how to report on ESG. London Stock Exchange, for example, has given good guidelines on what is strategic relevance, for investor criteria. So I think that debate is going to play out in the next couple of years, and we will hopefully then see convergence on a global standard where everybody's sort of, there's a level playing field where everybody's getting measured against the same standard.
That would be nice. I fear it'll be a few more than a couple of years to reach that. But I wanted then to move on to discuss about one other recently released benchmark, which are the responsible gold mining principles. I think they're about a year out now. And Sharon Flynn, OceanaGold, has committed publicly to implement the RGMPs. Wondered if you could summarize your experience to date and give us a little background on the assurance process that you're employing.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Derek. We're quite pleased with the responsible gold mining principles. We were involved in the group that developed those over a 2-year period. It really provides an industry-specific framework for setting out what does responsible gold mining mean. At the end of the day, it's about we're only able to actually demonstrate to stakeholders that we are committed through our performance. And so the responsible gold mining principles of the RGMPs really set the benchmarks for those. And I think that the World Gold Council has done a great job in working closely with all of those other external benchmarks and standards and really pulling together an aligned approach, working closely with they've been working with ICMM, working closely with TCFD, with GRI, with UN Global Compact, and ensuring that there's clear equivalencies between the RGMPs and all of those other standards. I think that it can be frustrating. Certainly people look at the standards, all of the ESG standards, like you said, for the 22. And I think we all tend to end up wanting to find that silver bullet, the single standard that's going to be able to cover off every single issue from labor rights to human rights to climate change. And I just don't think it's going to exist because, I mean, there's a zillion PhDs and deep areas of functional expertise across all of that area. And so I think companies really have to do the work to understand what the standards are and how they apply to their business. And World Gold Council has really, through the RGMPs, really worked with the gold industry to figure out what all those benchmarks mean to a gold mining company. So we really quite appreciate that. They're very pragmatic, very well researched. We just went through, it's similar to Global Tailings Standard. There's a 3-year implementation process, externally assured at the end. Asset level assurance, external assurance is required. We went through the first year assurance just a couple months ago, which was just an internal review that we had actually done the work to benchmark our own management systems and policies against the RGMPs. Very very straightforward, very easy. We are looking forward, actually, I say that somewhat eagerly, we're looking forward to all of the external assurance that's coming over the next couple of years, because it really helps us drive internal alignment and internal performance. And these are issues that our people are really committed to. So we're actually quite pleased with what the World Gold Council has done, and the collaborative approach that they've put together to develop the RGMPs.
Thanks, Sharon. Val Madsen, can you give us your view on the RGMPs?
Yeah, thanks, Derek. Look, at this stage, St Barbara hasn't yet committed to the responsible gold mining principles. However, as a member of the Minerals Council of Australia, we've certainly a signature to MCA's enduring values, which are, of course, based on the ICMM principles. But what I can say is we're certainly seeing that growing congruence around these standards, particularly as you look at each of those. And there's certainly some relative compatible requirements, which is great. So I think, as Sharon has stated, that they're certainly specific to areas, but we are seeing some, alignment around having robust governance requirements, the appropriate communications and engagement with communities, those public commitments, and then those periodic external auditing and verification. So look, I think it's an exciting space. I think, we've been really pleased to have had the opportunity as part of the consultation on the global tailings standard. We've certainly looking very closely at Canada's towards sustaining mining. We've seen a number of countries adopt that. It's of significant interest to us here in Australia. And of course, considering our Atlantic operations in Canada. So at the moment, we're certainly looking at the TSM, but not yet a member of the RGMP.
Thanks, Val. And of course, as a Canadian, I'm partial to TSM, and so I appreciate the good words. By the way, I noticed, Val, on your website, 2 of your 6 directors are women, and 4 of 15 members of your leadership team that are listed on the website, including yourself, of course. And I was just wondering, you operate in Papua New Guinea, and I wondered if you could share with us some of the challenges that you face there with respect to providing opportunities for women to benefit from your development.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. And as many of you will know, St Barbara is probably most well known for its work in diversity and inclusion, and we're an employer of choice for gender equality. We've had that citation from Australia's WGEA agency for now 6 years, and there are certain strict requirements in order to receive that citation. And it really does require companies to show strong leadership in areas like gender balanced workforce, flexible working, preventing harassment, bullying, gender pay equity, and driving change. So our commitment to diversity and inclusion and the work we have done in our Australian operations has really set us up to make a difference, particularly in PNG. And some of that's seen by our diversity and inclusion objectives, and you can see those in our annual report and our sustainability report. But we're currently employing over 120 women at our PNG worksite, and 65% of those are local Simberian Islanders. We've invested a lot over many years to upskilling at tertiary, at trade level, and we've certainly had our eyes on increasing the number of women in the workforce, but ensuring that we're providing a safe and secure workplace. And one of the ways that we've done that is part of our membership with the PNG Business Coalition for Women. In 2015, we were part of a pilot around gender smart safety. And we participated with Oil Search and palm oil. It was based on some really good research by the World Bank about the safety of women working in remote areas. And we know that mining, for the most part, is remote. And we're certainly on an island, and you can see that in the background here. And so we participated in that audit, and we have done for the last 5 years, which really looks at safety through the lens of gender. And it's a principle that could actually be used not just for gender, but for other minority groups. We've taken that principle and we've even applied it to our Australian operations. 2 years ago, we set ourselves a target. We had about 12 or 13% of women in the total workforce. And we set a target to get to 15%. And I'm really pleased to say we achieved that last year. And so we've increased our target now to 18%. And this month we've reached 16% already. And we still have 2 years to go to achieve our target. So really what we've done, Derek, is used what we've learnt around our success here in Australia and applied that in PNG. And you're right, there are certain challenges for women in PNG. There are very high levels of family and sexual violence in the country, but our gender smart safety audits and also some work we're doing around educating not just our workers, but the community members around the cycle of violence, the drivers of violence and strategies to address family issues rather than resorting to violence. And we've had some very, very good results with that. But I think there are social and cultural challenges for women working in PNG, and but we've seen some good results so far.
Well done, thank you. Cameron, I wanted to come back to you to ask about the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance, IRMA, the Standard for Responsible Mining. Anglo was central to the development of the initiative, and I wonder if you could comment for us on, as we discussed earlier, there's quite a lot of competition out there with the benchmarks that we have to deal with, and I wonder if you could comment about your own implementation of the standard at your operations and how IRMA is gaining traction at other companies.
Thanks. With IRMA, so IRMA has been a journey of many years, and it's been my colleague who's been very very integral in the sort of development of IRMA. And I think he very openly talks about, well, you know, he's had 2 children. One of them is about to hit high school, so you know this has very much been a journey. And I think to the original point, and to sort of support what Nicky was saying before, is it's actually been a multi-stakeholder approach right from the very beginning. So of course, you know, these things always take time, and I think, you know, there's been various iterations of IRMA, there's been various chapters, you know, companies have come, companies have gone. You know, it has very much been a process. And I think we've landed now in a place where it's like everybody feels both comfortable, and of course the key thing is, because it's been multi-stakeholder, there is a certain element of trust in what has now been pulled together. So, you know, from the mining side, you have, you know, Anglo American, you have ArcelorMittal. You've then also got kind of customers who are members. So BMW, Daimler just announced this week, Microsoft, Tiffany. You've then also got civil society as well. So you've got Oxfam, Human Rights Watch, IUCN, Industrial. So you've got this sort of big kind of coalition that's kind of come together. So instead of us developing a standard that we were very happy with, because, hey, we can tick those boxes, but civil society said, hey, it's the fox, you know, you're marking your own homework. That's not how we're going to approach this. I think we've now landed in a place where people feel a lot more kind of comfortable with the standards. So it's not easy. There is stretch in it. But I think, you know, when you look at what responsible mining companies and their approach to things, this isn't rocket science for them. This is things that they really should be doing. So I think we've got to the place, so now it's like, okay, we've been on this journey to create the standard. Now you have to implement it. So it's a bit like, you know, having a policy. What a great piece of paper. But unless you're actually implementing it and it becomes a living, breathing reality on the ground, it's completely pointless. So we've now just embarked on the kind of third-party assurance for our mine in Zimbabwe called Unki. So we're looking to get those results soon. And then, of course, in our sustainable mining plan, we've made the commitment that half of our sites will be subject to third-party assurance against a recognized standard. So, of course, you know, we have De Beers, but of course, they're already involved in the Responsible Jewelry Council, which is already a recognized standard as well. So again, those are the commitments that we've made, and we're looking to really, you know, road test Irma. And I think everybody is very open that until you kind of really do road test and actually put this thing to the test out in the field at a practical level, you're not going to know how effective it is. You know, like I say, it's been an effective process to get to this point, but is it really going to make operations cleaner, safer, better? Are the communities going to have more trust? Are our other stakeholders, so our customers, now going to feel, okay, this is Irma certified, I feel good about sourcing from that company. I can then assure my customers that across the entire value chain, it's been a responsible value chain. So I think, you know, we're in this next phase of Irma, which is really sort of making it become a reality on the ground and the operations. And yeah, I never thought I would say this. I am not a standards and systems person, but it is actually quite exciting because, again, if we can really demonstrate this value, a bit like what Sharon and Val were saying, then you could actually then have a lot more confidence to sort of say, yes, you know, this isn't something Anglo American saying we're a responsible mining company. It has been something that's been pulled together that our stakeholders, civil society, and others have kind of interrogated, and it just gives you that sort of extra level of confidence when you're talking about your operations and how you want to operate in the future as well. So my hope is that, you know, I'm not saying I want Irma to become the be all and end all, but what I do think is going to be valuable is the kind of alignment and cross-referencing capability of all of these assurance processes. So, you know, company, you know, operation is certified to TSM, does that then cross-check over to Irma? And I think that's going to be really, really important, that there is that kind of alignment of these different standards that have developed independently and all have their own place. But I do hope we're not going to see further proliferation, shall we say, but that we can work within the kind of standards that we have. And of course, these will need to evolve. And I think that is the other point. It's not a binary, here is a standard, that's it. The external context always evolves, operations always evolve, technology evolves, and we have to make sure that all of these standards and the assurance processes are evolving as the industry and society's expectations evolve as well. And we all just have to be okay with that.
Right, thank you. And just to clarify something you said, so do I understand then that it's up to the operations and or business units within Anglo to elect specific standards to apply in their own operations?
Well, we've left it open. So again, there would be no point in us saying to De Beers, you need to do Irma because they're already doing RJC. And again, you know, if there are other certifications, I'm not sure there are other ones that are sort of local, national level, but again, I think in Finland they're starting to develop something that's very similar to TSM. So again, it's more about how we can make this as sort of localized as possible, but still ensuring that we're delivering on the commitment about assuring against a third-party standard.
Right. Thanks. Okay. We have time for a few more questions. I wanted to direct one to Nicky, and this is with respect to the Juukan Gorge issue that arose with Rio Tinto and the Pilbara a few months back. I suppose that thinking back 15, 20 or more years, it would have been unthinkable that the CEO of a major mining company would have stepped down over a social issue. I'm sure that's a first. Can you give us your views from ICMM's perspective on this issue in terms of lessons learned for the industry?
Thank you, Derek, and happy to. So it's really clear that the tragic events around Juukan Gorge demonstrate that as an industry, we're not where we need to be on understanding and keeping pace with societal expectations of our sector. in this case in responding to and respecting the rights of Indigenous peoples and in relation to cultural heritage. So the key question is, how can we improve and build from here? And our view at ICMM, my personal view certainly, is that it has to start on the ground. It has to be about performance. We need to match a better capacity to listen and understand what is expected of us, and then be able to respond accordingly. It's about building our listening ability, but also our kind of responsive muscle. Now, deep experience across the sector indicates that this will require at least three things: systems, people, and priority being placed on these issues. Now, robust management systems need to underpin consistent and effective social performance. And that's where the mining principles, which we talked about in the previous section really come in. Within, and if I just take a moment to reflect on that. So within the performance expectations, which are ICMM's strengthened membership requirements, there are 38 expectations that cover areas including human rights, mine closure, resettlement, security, free prior informed consent, and respect for Indigenous peoples. Broadly, these performance expectations define good practice environmental, social, and governance requirements at site, but they also bring with them robust site-level validation and transparent disclosure of the outcomes. So what you will see is that of those 38 expectations, over half directly relate to social impact. So in terms of strengthening robust management systems across the sector, particularly in relation to social performance, within the next few years, stakeholders will get line of sight over the quality of management systems in place to support responsible mining across ICMM members' 650 plus assets in 50 countries. And I'll come back to some reflections on the disclosure question in a minute. So systems, having robust systems in place with transparent disclosure of the adequacy of those performance systems. The second one is people. You know, Freud has said, the policy is a bit of paper, you need it to be implemented, and people are critical to that. And it's not going to just be about employing more community relations people. It's going to be about everyone within the business understanding, from investor relations to procurement through to legal and the project teams, how what they do helps deliver social value for the community and helps deliver, as a result, business value. So it's really kind of building that understanding and the skill set of people. And the third is priority. You know, we need to ensure that social performance considerations are given appropriate and adequate weighting in business decision-making processes. It needs to be built in, not add on as a separate function that someone else then kind of delivers against the business strategy. It's got to be integrated. And what we saw in the analysis and commentary on Duke and Gorge is that systems, you know, people priority isn't enough without culture, the organizational culture that makes it everybody's business, and being open and proactive in engaging with community and society at every level. So just, I suppose my final reflection is that securing and maintaining free prior informed consent is really challenging. It's an ongoing conversation, it's a recommitment, and it's recognizing that this is not a transactional permitting process. This is a live engagement with groups of people who have specific sets of rights. So in that, companies, investors, government, and communities all have a role to play. And from this tragic breach of trust, this breakdown of a really vital relationship, our hope is that we can learn about what went wrong and work together to put in place the systems, the people, the priority, but really the culture that's going to support consistent, effective practice on these issues and social performance more broadly. If I could just reflect briefly, because it was in the previous discussion on this challenge around the noise on disclosure, and what we just, I suppose, just to point out that for ICMM, we've worked from the beginning in developing the performance expectations, in understanding what other initiatives and standards there are in place, what works, what is broadly supported, and then reflecting that within the performance expectations. And we're working very hard to secure equivalency across the plethora of disclosure standards. We will be announcing 4 equivalency standards next month, with more to come. And where we recognize that on, there's a lot of noise in ESG reporting. A lot of it is about pumping out particular performance data, some of it at site. And we don't believe necessarily that that's very useful without a lot of context. What is more useful often is assurance of the quality of performance management systems in place. And that's where ICMM's performance expectations, we hope, will really make a significant difference.
Good point. Thank you. Thank you. I guess this wouldn't be 2020 if I didn't ask at least one COVID question, and that I wanted to direct to Sharon Flynn. You operate in a few jurisdictions. One of them, New Zealand, is admired certainly here in Canada and probably worldwide for its extremely successful control efforts around the pandemic. Another operating jurisdiction, the United States, I believe South Carolina is where you operate. And I can say this as an American citizen, is viewed as widely as a failure on COVID. How has OceanaGold managed the pandemic, and have you maintained operational continuity? And has there been any influence on your relationships with your local communities?
Yes, all good questions. COVID-19 has been a challenge, and you're right. The jurisdictional challenges that we face in New Zealand are different than those that we face in South Carolina or the Philippines. But our approach has been common. We need to leverage our expertise around health and safety and put in place clear controls that reduce the risk of exposure for our employees, inform our workforce so they can manage the risk themselves and also with their families, be hyper vigilant, and put together very stringent plans that have a significant focus on physical distancing. So, but we also have to do that within the context of jurisdictional requirements. And obviously too, there's a very different approach to healthcare in New Zealand versus in South Carolina. But we have to figure out how to work externally with those healthcare networks as to how they actually exist in each of those jurisdictions. So in New Zealand, we did have to shut down initially for 5 weeks. This was, I think it was around March or April. I think Jacinda was one of the first leaders to shut down the whole country. Of course, there's just 5 million folks there. So it was a bit of a different challenge than perhaps what the US could do. So we did shut down for 5 weeks, but we've been able to fully recover both for our production targets and underground development targets for Macraes and Waihi. And we've had no confirmed cases of COVID-19 at our operations in New Zealand, but we also don't face the significant community transmission that exists, say, in South Carolina. So in South Carolina, we have been successful. We've had 28 COVID cases so far in a context where there is significant community transmission. We've had to very much focus there. Obviously, the priority is the safety of our employees. So the biggest impact to our business and to continuity has come from the precautionary measures that we've put in place, where we're requiring at-risk employees who have been exposed. There's a huge amount of contact tracing that has to be done by the company and also in coordination with the health services and other community organizations. So any at-risk employees are required to self-isolate until they've got a cleared COVID test. And that self-isolation precautionary measure has impacted about 70% of our workforce. So that has impacted, obviously, our production this year. But as we say, the gold isn't going anywhere, and we'll gain that back in 2021.
Right.
So we definitely want to focus on the health and safety of our employees. And I think in general, particularly in an election year, it's quite easy to stereotype perhaps different cultures, but across all of our business, employees have been really committed to implementing the protocols and behaviors that are needed to protect themselves, protect their families, and to protect each other in the workplace. So we're quite, we have to keep hyper vigilant and keep focused and keep up with the changes. So you just can't let your guard down at any point.
Right. Thank you. Hermien, any comments from your end with your operating jurisdictions on COVID-19? How has it played out there?
Yeah, so much the same, in the sense that we had a hard lockdown initially for 21 days, and then that was followed by an extension for a further 2 weeks in South Africa. And during that time, I think PGMs and gold were affected mostly because of the deep underground mines, from where those products are mined. Some of the open cast mines could apply to the DMRE, for limited operations carrying on. There was also coal mining that was allowed so that Eskom could, secure energy in the country during the hard lockdown. Some of the smelters and refineries, could maintain operations at a certain level. But I think the mining industry in South Africa, definitely through our Minerals Council, can be applauded for taking a leading role in rolling out standard operating procedures at a very early stage in March. That was later on followed by a mandatory code of practice, which some of the other industries in our country piggybacked on in taking, as sort of a guidance, a note, if you wish, on how to protect people and operations. So definitely have done well, have tested a lot of people. I think our testing rate stands at more or less 13% worldwide. I think it's 11.3% if I'm not mistaken. So very well done by the mining industry in South Africa, and also brought on board a lot of additional testing capacity when we saw that our public health facilities were potentially not going to cope with the numbers of tests that were required. So have weathered the storm, and very thankful for the fact that we have managed to get through this. Not that we through it 100%. We obviously in the south, we've seen the second wave, and we're very cautious to keep on complying with those practices to protect our people.
Yeah, we're all learning to live with it, I guess, is the bottom line. I'm going to return one more quick question, and I'm going to return to where I started with Richard Elmer. Is any comments from you around COVID from your perspective as a consultant in the industry?
Yeah, just a couple of quick observations. First of all, obviously, we were very concerned because a key part of tailing stewardship is to have independent reviews of and inspections of facilities, and we were severely curtailed in terms of being able to travel to locations. And so it has seen an increase, fortunately, of remote type inspections. So technologies, we've managed to undertake remote inspections through use of drone footage, through photographs, through sort of real-time viewing of facilities through the eyes of people that are on site. So there's been a significant step forward. But one thing I would say, that it still doesn't quite replace the actual boots on the ground value of going to visit the sites. And we're managing to start to travel now, and have in most jurisdictions we're working, we're recognised as a critical industry. So we've been welcomed back to Kazakhstan, back to Macedonia, various places that we've been working at recently, and it's a relief to get back looking at these facilities through our own eyes. But there is a place for the remote inspections, and that has fulfilled a gap. It's like a bridging sort of thing. But I just really want to say that our findings, it doesn't actually replace going to site and meeting with the people and talking about their tailings governance, understanding where they're coming from. And so, yeah, I think there's some lessons to be learned, but yeah, a drone doesn't replace a person quite yet.
Yes, and this industry does depend on travel in more ways than one, for sure. And I'm sure that we'll be back to it hopefully sooner rather than later. I think we're pretty much out of time now. And so I just wanted to close off by I guess just a personal note that I'm sure that all of us on the panel, me more than most of you, I think, have been doing ESG since long before ESG was a term. I know I started in it, I guess 30 years ago, when I first joined an environmental consultant in Vancouver. And when I take into account the comments that I've heard around the table today, I have to say that the world has changed in this industry, and for the better. That's for sure. And also taking note of what you've communicated today, we have a lot more work to do going forward. So thank you all for participating in the panel today, and thanks to Mines and Money for hosting us. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.